I was 17 years old, still in high school. At the time, me and my friends, whose name were Sean and Jeff, were really into haunted things. We used to watch a ton of horror movies and play scary video games and stuff in our free time. One day, Jeff went to the store and bought a Ouija board. The following day at school, he told us everything about it, so we decided to take a look at it that night. We agreed to meet at Sean's place and check it out there. That night, my brother and I got into a fight over who would play our PlayStation first, since we only had one remote. Of course, he complained to Mom about it, and I was grounded for a day, which messed up my plans to meet everyone. I went straight to my room to text Sean and tell him what happened. He then agreed to postpone the plans. The next day after school, Sean and Jeff made fun of me, saying that I just made up an excuse to stay home since I was scared to play the game. We laughed about it and later on decided that we would plan on playing with the Ouija board over the weekend. When the time came, everyone was excited and invited some other people from our class to come, but unsurprisingly, no one was brave enough to try it outside of us. The three of us assumed that the stories surrounding the game were tales that were made up to scare people and keep them away from challenging the unknown. That's exactly what we intended to do, to find out if the stories were real or not. There were still a couple of days left till the weekend. That night, we all met in a coffee shop and did some research on the Ouija board, its rules, and techniques of playing. We additionally researched if the game was real or not. Most of what we read online said that it was, but some people disagreed. Simply put, 80% of what we found said that it was true, and 20% said that it was false. I guess that we were part of the 20%, as we were still skeptical. Time passed, and finally it was Saturday. I woke up early and went for a jog like I always do. That night, I got permission from my mom to spend the night at Sean's house. She agreed since I helped her run errands the whole day. I packed my stuff and said my goodbyes and left. When I reached Sean's house, Jeff wasn't there yet, so we waited for him to show up. After he arrived, we watched some movies while we waited for midnight. When the time finally came, Sean took out the board and set everything up. The papers that came with the box had the instructions written on them. The most important rule was to always say goodbye before you close the game. At the time, we were filled with so much excitement and curiosity, we didn't really pay attention to the instructions and decided to just carry on with the game. Sometimes reading instructions just distracts you from playing the game, so we decided not to this time. Jeff opened the board and placed a planchette on it. All three of us placed one finger on the planchette. Sean lit some candles to set the scene for a creepy vibe. The first question we asked was, "Is anybody there?" We waited for a minute, and then the planchette moved to the yes printed on the board. I thought that Sean or Jeff did it. We laughed, and then Jeff asked the question, "Am I good looking?" Then Sean purposely moved the planchette to no. We laughed again. Since the purpose of the Ouija board is to speak to the dead, my dad passed away in a car accident a couple of months ago. I wanted to talk to him, so I asked, "Dad, are you there?" The planchette moved to yes. First I thought that Jeff did it. Then I asked, "Do you miss me?" The planchette moved from yes to the middle of the board, after which went back to yes. At this point, I was starting to think that this wasn't so fake. Then I asked, "What's my name?" And the planchette moved to each letter and in the end made a word. A-R-O-N, which is my name. After that, I asked Sean and Jeff which one of them was doing that, and both of them swore it wasn't them. Obviously, I wasn't doing it, so I still figured it was probably one of them. After that, we decided that after anyone asked a question, all three of us would elevate our fingers up from the planchette to keep our weight from interfering with the process. I asked, "How do you feel after dying?" After saying that, all three of us lifted our fingers up from the planchette, but it was still moving. All of us were stunned and scared. It spelled horrible. Now we knew that it was actually real, and the incidents that followed that night with the Ouija board must be real too. We packed up the game and went to sleep. I had a dream that night that I was sleeping at Jeff's house in his room with Sean. I saw my dad standing in the door looking at me. I got up out of bed and went to him. I hugged him and we talked for a few minutes until he vanished. After that, I woke up and looked towards the door and I saw a shadow in the shape of my dad's image. At first, I was scared until I realized it was him. So I went to him and asked, "Dad, is that really you?" He was smiling at me and simply replied, "How are you, son?" My eyes widened and I hugged him tight and said, "I miss you." He hugged me back and said, "I miss you too, son." Then he asked me, "How's your mom?" I replied, "She's good." Then he asked about my brother, and I told him that he misses you a lot. Jeff woke up after hearing me talk and asked, "Yo, you all right?" I looked towards him and said, "Yeah, I'm just talking to my dad." He looked and said, "Aaron, go back to sleep. There's no one there." I looked at the spot where my dad was standing and he was no longer there, so I just went back to bed. I laid in bed for a while but couldn't fall asleep. After a while, I saw him again and quickly went back to him, and he angrily asked me,
"Why did you kill me?"
I replied, "I wasn't with you, Dad. It was you and Mom in the car arguing, and then you crashed into a tree." Then he said,
"Your mother killed me."
I told him that she feels that way too. Jeff woke up listening to my conversation and asked if I was all right. I told him that it's my dad, and as quickly as I looked back towards the door, he was gone again. I couldn't sleep after that. After Jeff went back to sleep, I noticed him again. This time, he was bleeding badly and had the same injuries I saw on him when he died, all over his body. He told me that I needed to kill my mom and that she should also kill me and my brother. I told him that I'm not crazy and I won't do that. He stared at me as his eyes slowly turned pitch black and said,
"Fine, I'll kill them myself."
With tears welling up in my eyes, I yelled, "Dad, just go back to whatever place you came from," and I ran back to bed. The next morning, as soon as I went home, I knocked on the door and rang the doorbell, but no one answered. So I took the spare key out from under the doormat and went inside to see where everyone was. No one was home. I tried to recall if my mom and brother had mentioned if they were going somewhere today, but nothing came up in my memory. So I just went to my room and started playing video games. It was almost evening when I realized that they still haven't gotten back yet. So I started to get a little worried and decided to call my mom. The phone rang, but she didn't pick up. I called her again and again, but no response. Now I was getting worried and went to my neighbor's house to ask them if my mom had told them anything about going somewhere that day, but they didn't know anything about it either. I went back to my house and called her again, but I still didn't get any response. So I sent the text message saying, "Mom, where are you? I've been home alone since this morning and I don't know why you're not answering my calls. So please call or text me back as soon as you get this." Feeling hungry, I went to the kitchen and made myself a sandwich, and then started watching TV. It was around 8 p.m. when I checked my phone again, but still no response. After a while, the doorbell rang and I went to see who it was. It was Sean and his dad. Sean told me that my mom asked them if I could stay at his house for another night. I was a bit confused, but I proceeded to lock the house and go with them. When we reached the house, his mom already had dinner on the table for us. So we ate, then Sean and I went to his room. I tried calling my mom again, but she didn't respond. We watched some movies and played a few games for a while before we went to sleep. The next morning, when I woke up, I checked my phone and noticed I had 3 missed calls from my mom. I quickly got up and called her, but her phone was off. So I got up, got dressed, and went downstairs. Sean was still sleeping, but his mom greeted me while she was preparing breakfast. I told her that I should go home right away and I will eat breakfast there. She wanted me to stay and eat with them, but I convinced her otherwise and rushed back home. When I got there, I rang the doorbell and no one responded, so I unlocked the door and went inside. No one was in the living room, so I yelled out, "Mom," but got no response. I went to my mom's room and she was laying on the bed lifeless, and the mattress had blood all over it. I screamed in shock and ran to my brother's room. He was also dead. I called 911 and spent the night at my neighbor's house a couple houses down. The next morning, I woke up around 2 a.m. and that's when I noticed him. I went to my dad in rage, pushing him and yelling, "Why did you do it?" He replied,
Because you didn't.
I punched him, but then he started choking me. He picked me up by the shirt and threw me on my bed. Then he began stabbing me with the knife. Instantly feeling the pain, I tried to scream, but his hand was covering my mouth. After a few minutes, I started to lose consciousness and proceeded to pass out. When I came to, I woke up in my bed around 5 a.m. I was relieved that it was only a nightmare. I went to the kitchen to get some water and decided to check in on my mom. I went to her room and again she was lying there dead. I could see blood all over her sheets. And then I rushed to my brother's room and he was dead as well. I didn't know how they died. Everything was so unexpected. I called 911 and they inspected the house. Once they were done, they stated that there was no one else in the house and no murder weapon was found. My aunt offered to let me live with her until I was old enough to get my own place and live on my own. At the time, I had no other choice, so I accepted her offer. It's been 6 months since that incident took place, and I still haven't discovered what happened to them or who killed them. The police investigation is still active and no evidence is yet to be found. My advice to you, if you ever decide to play with Ouija boards or things that involve communicating with or challenging things that are most commonly referred to as the unknown, I'm warning you not to. You could end up like me, or worse.